Hey guys, it's SRC Reptiles, and today I'm going to be making a video series. This will be episode 1 of how to care for crested geckos. So today's episode will be completely about housing. So anyway, this guide here you can use if you are a breeder or if you are someone that just has one as a pet. It is not just specifically for one or the other. So these kinds of containers here, like what I have little nicks in, which I believe it's nicks, yes. This little container here you can actually find at the Dollar Tree or the dollar store. It really just depends on where you live. If you don't have a Dollar Tree or dollar store, you could try looking at Walmart and see if they have anything of similar size. You can see this is what the container looks like. When I first started breeding, I would have just holes drilled into the side with a solder iron. Obviously that's not what I suggest doing now. Yes, they do require higher humidity, but you don't want it to be that high because mold and bacteria can grow. So I bought screen mesh, like what you can get at Walmart in like the hardware section over by where they have screen door repair kits. I have a solder iron, like I said. I got it off of Amazon. I just use it to melt that plastic to the size that I want for that mesh. And then after I do that, I will use hot glue and attach this net here, or this screen. Sorry, my hair was annoying me. I use the hot glue to attach this screen onto here and add ventilation. So if you are capable of doing that, I know that's a lot, but if you're capable of DIYing your own lids, I would highly suggest it. It definitely allows for way better ventilation. If you're having problems with your humidity being really dry versus being a little bit more damp, you can always use a wash rag and lay it over half of that lid and dampen the rag to keep the humidity in there. But anyway, back to what I was originally talking about. So these size tanks can be used for babies that hatch till they're about 3 months old. Now if you have any that are really slow growers, like this year I had Alucard, which is one of my babies. I just recently moved into that size. He was in this size for about 5 or 6 months. And he is a really small baby. He has finally started to hit his growth spurt. They'll hit a couple growth spurts before they become adult size, but he's finally getting a little bit bigger, so he got moved into that container. But yeah, so again, this is the container that I normally will start off the babies in. But let's say that you want to just flat out get a glass enclosure and you don't have to mess with, don't want to mess with tanks like this. That's perfectly fine, but you do need to take into consideration the size of the tank you're getting for the size of the animal you have. So just to kind of give you an idea of the size of baby that lives in this tank, because she's kind of hiding. I'm pretty sure this is a boy. So this here is the size of the baby that is in that tank. Very small, not teeny tiny, but she came out of her egg at about, I believe it was Thanksgiving actually. Also, one big misconception I'll go ahead and point out real quick. A lot of people think that if you grab a crested gecko's tail that they're going to drop it like immediately. I will tell you right now that I am gently gripping her tail, and see how she's just wiggling it out. She's not dropping it because, or I'm just going to say she right now. I know this baby's probably a boy, but right now, this baby, I'm like grabbing its tail, I'm touching it. I'm handling it that way. Also, you can stick your finger under their tail and hold them like this. This is a really safe way to actually pick them up. If you're having trouble picking them up from under the belly, because most of the time you want to come over and just kind of scoop them up like that, which I'll kind of try to face you so you can see, but you'll come around and just normally scoop them up like this, being very gentle. So you can see, it's literally just me moving my hand. The baby is literally just chilling here. Has no problems with sitting like that, and I can just bring my hand upright and she will probably, just release and keep walking. So anyway though, a little tip there to how to handle really jumpy babies or babies that are hard to access. Like I said, if you're gentle, don't go grabbing their tail and pulling on it. It will make it come off at that point. But just touching their tail, and if you can get them used to being touched like this when they're tiny, it's going to whoop. It's a good thing these guys weigh absolutely nothing, because them hitting the carpet, they just bounce. They don't actually get injured. But I figured I'd just tell you guys that real quick, and of course, like I said, this is the size baby that I would put in that size of a tank, and I think this one's actually getting pretty close to being ready to be moved, because this one was hatched out in November, and it is March. So this one here is actually probably about to the size that it's going to be getting moved into the next size up, which I'll show you guys. So this size tank here is what I move them into once they hit that 4-month mark. Now, of course, like I said, if you have any that are slow growers, then they don't have to be moved out of that container into this size right away. This container, I can tell you though, is about a foot in length, or I should say a foot high, so about 12 inches, pretty close if not already. So these are shoebox containers. They are made to hold the average shoe. And if you think about it, the average shoe is a pretty decent length when it comes to a baby gecko. So just to give you an idea, I sadly don't have a ruler in here. I would measure it, but if it's not 12 inches, it's probably about 11, just to give you guys an idea. So with these tanks, there is a little bit more work that goes into them. So obviously a lot bigger of an area that you would want to cut out and turn into a ventilated area. I mean, you could even do just half. You wouldn't have to do the entire length if you didn't want to. I only did that just because during the summer when it's raining a lot here in Kansas, it does get pretty humid. So giving the maximum amount of airflow that you can really helps to keep the humidity from getting too high. Now, of course, in the winter, you're constantly having to mist like 2 or 3 times a day, unless you figure out a way with this tank to somehow attach a rag. That I have not tinkered with because I'm pretty good about misting. But these containers I like because they have a lid that actually opens. So obviously they have this front lid. I will say real quick, another thing I just remembered, you will want to hot glue this lid onto the container. I had one baby escape out of this type of container because this lid fits very loosely onto the container, and they managed to slip through this crack, which I can't demonstrate because this is hot glued on there. If you ever do use a container like this, you'll want to make sure there is a hole right here that's for your finger. And I'm sure you can see this little bit of area where there is tape. You'll want to put tape over that hole to make sure that they cannot get out, because that is one area that they would be able to escape through. You can see my finger is going through here. So, but this container works perfect till they are about 8 months old. When they hit 8 months old, then I move them into their biggest container they'll be in until they leave my care. Now, I've only had to ever upgrade a few of my babies to a bigger enclosure. Most of the time by then I try to really actively advertise them and so they can get new homes and get sold. But I'll show you real quick the size of baby that is in here, just to give you guys an idea. Now, Fudge is a little bit smaller than some of the other babies that stay in here, but you can see that Fudge is quite a bit bigger than Nyx was. So that is what she looks like. And she is a bicolor. And she's got a few portholes. So that there is Fudge. And you can see she's pretty decent size, but she does perfectly fine in this size of an enclosure. And once they come out, then they want to stay out. But it's like, sorry, you can't today. So this here is the final size when it comes to totes that I will move my babies into. And as you can see, this container here is pretty decent size. It's pretty big. So the measurements on it is 16.85 inches in width, 12 inches in depth, and the height is 14 inches. So this is a pretty good size container to put a baby in. Like I said, whether you're breeding or if you have one as a pet, this size container here is pretty nice. I will say I love this exact container here. It's pretty much escape proof, which is nice too. So the lids have these little grooves on them there where the handle is, and you'll hear it in a second, but you can see I've turned that much of the screen into mesh, or that much of the lid into mesh. The container is really nice and big. You can see this little baby here is the one that's in this tote. This here is Uno, and he, I believe, will be a year old in June. Yeah, so he's going to be a year old in 3 months. And he is in this size container. So he's not one of the bigger ones that I have. But you can see here, Uno, he's very well behaved. Sometimes, if you've watched any of my other videos, he is a shithead sometimes. But when it comes to handling, when he's calm and he's not being crazy, he does really well with being handled. I'll go ahead and stick him back in there. But you can see too, if you've noticed when you've seen all the other tanks I'm showing you, I put a decent amount of stuff in there. You want to make sure when you're viewing your babies that you cannot see them immediately. You want to make sure there is enough cover and enough hidey areas that they feel safe. But let me show you real quick. If you hear that, there is several little indents that you have to push that through for it to lock into place. this lid is on there solid. Like, they are not going to be getting out of that. There is a little bit of an area here that is kind of loose, but I can't even stick my finger in there. So it's pretty secure. I really love these containers. They cost about $10 at Walmart. The shoebox containers, it really varies in price depending on where you're buying them from. But I got 4 or 5 at Walmart for, I think it was $3 or $4. As where when I was at Bed Bath & Beyond one time, they had a set of 4 for $20. So it really does vary. Actually, maybe it was around $5 at Walmart, somewhere in there, but it was not over 6, that's for sure. But this, I'll say real quick before I forget, once you've got babies in here, at about 8 months is when I move them into this size. So now I'm going to show you guys the glass tanks and the different sizes I have based on the animals and what they look like and their age range and all that fun stuff. So this is pretty much the more affordable tanks that you can make for your geckos. Yes, they're not the most appealing, even though this one here is probably the most appealing out of all of them that I have, and these ones I like the best. But some people like the aesthetics of a glass tank. So I will be showing you guys a glass tank. Also, some tank sizes that you want to get might not come in a plastic tote. But anyway, let's go ahead and I'll show you the different size glass terrariums that I have and just kind of give you guys an idea of what all I have in those and also the cost difference. Okay guys, so here is the Exoterra 12 by 12 by 18. Depending on where you're buying it, it varies anywhere from like $50, which is a really lucky find if you find them for that cheap anymore. They more or less are around like $75 now, which is kind of ridiculous. It really depends on where you're shopping around. Some places you can find them online cheaper, and sometimes you can find them in just like a mom and pop store for a little bit more reasonable price. So if you're having to pay more than $75, then they are overcharging you because I don't think I could imagine paying like $100+ for a small tank like this. That would be ridiculous. But so this here, like I said, Exoterra. I've never had any trouble with Exoterra tanks. Now I do have one that had where this latch here was starting to come loose and break and not latch at all, and that tank was only like a year or two old, as were some of these I've had for several years and I've never had that problem. So you do have to kind of be a little weary, but that is only 1 out of like 6 that I've owned that's ever done that, so I'm not really too worried about it. So Exoterra, which this one works perfectly fine for small adults. This here is the 18 by 18 by 18. Also, pardon this gauge right here because it's broken. The ones I will always suggest now, because I've not had that happen, are these guys, which are Zoomed, and they are the digital combo. Now, those cost you about $13 to $20, depending on where you buy them, but I will always suggest those now because these ones I've had like 3 or 4 now within the last 3 years that have broken with the humidity. That's kind of important. So, because of that, now I have to rely on reading the humidity readings of the other tanks to have an idea of what this one's at. But anyway, before I got distracted, so this is a really nice size for an adult gecko for the rest of its life if it is a small-bodied gecko. So, if your crested gecko is about 7 to 8 inches maximum, full grown, then they would be perfectly fine in here. Now, if they don't have a tail, if they're a frog butt, normally they're only about 5 or 6 inches in length without their tail. They'll do just fine in here. But if you've got one like Ember, or even like Mischief here, he's actually going to be getting moved into a larger tank once I move and have more space. Because he's pretty decent size. Mischief is about 9 inches in length, and with his tail and whatnot. So he and Indigo, which is up here, which I just noticed her plant fell. Indigo is also pretty large-bodied. I think she's like 8 or 9 inches in length. So Mischief and Indigo will be getting upgraded once I have the space. For now, it does not hurt them to be in this tank because this is a lot better than the one I just got done showing you guys. Some people, for some reason, think it's perfectly fine to keep an adult crested gecko in this tiny little tank. Please, please don't do that. Like, there's no room for enrichment in there, and it's just ridiculous. So I don't think Mischief is probably where I can reach him, because I don't spot him. But, let me see. if one of the smaller ones are out so I can kind of give you guys an idea. I actually don't see any of them, which I'm kind of sad. So up here is Snickers Tank. Let me feel in her bubble loft and see if she's in there. Okay, she's not. So, most likely, let me pause this and see. I think she should be back in that corner back there. Okay, so this here is Snickers. And as you can see, she's pretty decent size, but that's mainly because she's fat. She's on a diet right now because she was like 75 grams last month, which is not a healthy weight. But of course, those we'll go over in a different video. But you can see here, she's pretty short. She's probably about 5 inches long and like maximum without her tail. She was bred here and I've had her since she was a little tiny baby. We'll go ahead and put her back in here. But yeah, so for Snickers, this size of a tank is perfectly fine because she is a lot smaller. Now, if she, of course, had her tail, she would be a lot longer, but, you know, she had to go and drop that when she was like a year and a half. So that kind of gives you guys an idea. Now, these here, the reason, before I forget, the reason that I said that if you have to pay more than $85 for that 12 by 12 by 18, don't do it. So these tanks, I know that this is not everywhere, but the people that I get these tanks from that have a, like, a family-owned shop here in town, or not here in town, but like 25 miles away from where I live, there is a family-owned shop. They sell these tanks for $89. You get literally the tank and the foam background. That's all you get. No kit, no nothing. But that is so cheap and reasonable. So there was one time when I bought one of these just to see how well I liked it. And then I went back in and I bought 3 more because they hardly ever get them in. So that's where I get these from. So these tanks down here, which are the ones that I want to use for Mischief and Indigo for them to both have eventually. These are the 18 by 18 by 24s. So at the time that that family-owned shop had recently opened, I got these for $100 each. Like, I couldn't even, like, I was like, whoa. Most of the time, these tanks go for like $160 to like almost $200 at like pet stores like PetSmart and whatnot. And so when I saw that price, I snatched them up. Now, I feel like they're probably more like around $150 now, probably, because it's been like 3 or 4 years since that shop opened, and prices have obviously gone up. But these tanks, I would suggest, and pardon Magma's finger painting over here with his food, I would suggest these tanks for an animal that is about 8 or 9 inches and up. So here we've got Magma, which I believe he's like 8 or 9 inches in length, and then Ember is in here, and she's 10 inches. Now, I don't know where Ember is, but I can see Magma. He's always out and about. So I will use him as an example. So you can see Magma here is a pretty decent sized gecko when it comes to how long he is. So I'll try to kind of, well, I can't lay him out completely on my hand because he kind of wants to curl his tail around. But you can see that he's pretty long with his body. So he gets one of these tanks. And it also gives you so much room to be able to, like, deck it out with decor. Now, when you are decorating a tank, you don't want to fill it too full, but you do want to make sure they've, like I said earlier, have plenty of places to hide, have things at different levels so that they have plenty of, like, different options to climb and explore. And sometimes when I clean the tanks, I will, like, redecorate stuff and I'll move things around. Some stuff has to stay where it's at, but other things I can kind of shift around. I don't know if Ember is out. I might try to dig her out just to show you guys just how big she is. And I have measured her to make sure that it is 10 inches that she is. Okay, she's not in her coconut, so that's a good sign that I can probably find her somewhere pretty easily. Well, guys, this just kind of goes to show I have this tank decorated too well, because I just spent about 5 minutes with my flashlight on my phone trying to find her, and I can't, but I know she hasn't escaped, so I just know she's really hiding good somewhere, because she's got a lot of plants in here, like you can't really tell because it's kind of dark, but she has about 10 hanging plants in here along with all these vines and stuff, and I can't find her, so I guess Ember's not going to be in this video. There's plenty of other videos I have that show her, but yeah. Now, there are other options you guys could probably do, like 20-gallon longs would probably work just fine if you were to turn aquariums into a tank that you could stand upright. And of course this tank is for my leopard gecko, but I would just say you'd have to kind of DIY a lid to go on the front, because otherwise you'd have to kind of figure out how to make sure the dirt and stuff doesn't come out, and also you're having to worry about if the gecko is sitting on the door of the tank, like it can poop out and stuff. So there's just a few things you'd have to take into consideration, but I've seen on websites like Etsy that people have made like acrylic doors that will go into the grooves of aquariums, and they have them for 10 gallons and they also have them for 20 gallons, and I'm sure even bigger tanks. So I know there are options, they're just kind of expensive, so at that point you're probably going to just be better off buying one of these guys. Actually, I think a 20 gallon is almost 3 feet. It's like 30 inches long or something, so they are a little bit taller than these guys by like 4 or by like 6 inches. So it just takes a little bit more work to turn that into a tank with a door versus just buying one. So I guess it really just depends on where you live and if you can get all the supplies to do stuff with them. Well, guys, that's going to be the end of this episode. And like I said, this episode was specifically about housing. So up here in this area, well, actually in this area over here, I will put on the screen like the plastic tanks and their basic or their general prices, and then the glass tanks and what I paid for them versus what I like can find them for online, just to give you guys an idea of what the prices are kind of compared to what it is if you can find somebody that's not charging out the butt for these tanks. So, but anyway guys, hopefully this was informative. Hopefully it helped you learn, like when it comes to tanks, what to expect. They're not a cheap pet, so I mean, honestly, any reptile, none of them are really cheap to take care of, so each one kind of has its ease of care, but, or it'll be really hard to care for, but there's always the cost of buying the tank and all of the stuff that goes with it, and the food. So, but anyway, guys, like I said, hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully it helped you kind of learn about tanks and how old the gecko needs to be moved from one to the other, or like sizes to choose from. Like, yeah, hopefully it was helpful for you guys. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to support the channel, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.